Hi, this is Edward with sonsofgod.com. It's Sunday morning, 17th of October. These are, I guess you might call it, my cliff notes on a word that is yet unfolding, but I wanted to share some of my ponderings with you. And because I know that we're in a time of clarity, we're in a time that God is bringing a deeper understanding as far as the dynamics behind sonship. I have not felt that sonship was just going to happen where one morning we wake up and we've been transfigured. I believe that it is a process. It doesn't mean it's a lengthy process, but there is a process. And when I say process, what I'm saying is that there's a requirement for an interaction or participation on our part. If something was just to be done sovereignly by the Lord, that you wake up one morning, you've been transfigured, that would be like the rapture. And we know the Lord's not moving in that direction. But what I see is a process, and I define process by virtue of the participation that is required from us in the unfolding manifestation of sonship and what God is completing within us. The word came so strongly this afternoon that it was time for the end of the reign of soul, and it didn't necessarily come with a lot of oohs and ahs and specific keys or principles. It was more declaration, I believe, in the Spirit that basically was identifying something that is being finished now. And it must be for the first wave of sonship in the earth to begin to manifest. Sonship will not manifest as long as there is the baggage of the soul and the encumbrances of the soul. That has to be removed. There is no question in my mind about that. How we do it, of course, remains a question to some degree. But I believe the Spirit was basically identifying that we're in a season or time now that we will see the completion of the reign of the soul over our lives. And we've talked about this in the book, we've talked about it here at the website. The transition into sonship is a transition from living a life born of soul into living a life born of spirit. And it's anything that we do in the course of the day that is driven out of our soul is going to leave us vulnerable, will create bonds and contacts and cords, and will continue to delay the manifestation of what God is doing within our lives. So I feel in many ways as though the Lord's going to fill in the contract as we go here. He's going to fill in the lines as far as how this is being orchestrated. But I do know that with the word that recently came about the power to become, what was so startling to me was actually just meditating on that scripture, John 1:12. To them he gave the power to become. And it escaped me. It has escaped me. And I went back and I looked at that and I thought, that never sank in. He gave me the power to become. And at that moment, a dozen pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Visions, dreams, appearings, things that the Lord has spoken of for the last 10 years, requirements, demands that He's made of me, as well as just other feedback that has come in the realm of spirit. And I've had questions, but all of this came together when I saw that scripture in a new light, and I realized that, oh my goodness, there is a tremendous initiative upon us to become. So God has given you the power to become, but it doesn't mean that you become. It means that you have the ability or the capability of doing so. And the question is whether or not you will, which then brings us to the parable of the wise and foolish virgins. So what did the wise and foolish virgins have in common? They were virgins. They had set themselves apart to the Lord. They served none other. They were virgins, yet one had prepared their heart, the other one had not. So when you say prepared, what do we talk about? In the context of these words that we've been bringing, we're talking about your ability to see. That's really what it is. And bottom line, the Lord comes and says, you know what, I gave you the power to become. Yes, you've set yourself apart, but you missed it somewhere here. You didn't do your homework because you're not seeing. You're not seeing. And so that's the dynamic that we are facing, is the requirement of sight. You know, I don't want to come before the Lord. And the Lord said, you know, you did a great job there, Edward, but you didn't quite see. So you really didn't quite do what I wanted you to do, what I sent you to do. I really don't want to have to face that reality. I realize that there's a requirement upon me to see. And there aren't going to be any excuses when you come before the Lord and say, well, gosh, you know, I'm sorry I had to tend this, I had to deal with this, I had all these things, and which of course hindered my ability to see, and all these little relationships and things. And the Lord just says, you know what, you didn't deal with it. And we've talked about bonds and relationships, cords, contacts, all of that. So what do? Well, the one thing they do is they prevent your ability to see. They prevent your ability to know yourself, to know who you are. So when it comes down to it, you've got the wise and the foolish virgins, those that reached in and prepared, and those that were not able to see. And I know that in the whole issue of the power to become, it is contingent entirely upon your ability to see. You've been empowered. I've been empowered. But how do we bring it forth? We bring it forth by vision, by sight. I began to see that very clearly over the last few weeks as levels of discernment began to open up, and I began to see what I had not seen and realize that, oh, once you see, you're able to move in with authority, take dominion over it. You're able to literally free yourself. And I know that years ago the Lord brought a word, and He said, and I said this in the previous message, the spiritual priesthood will know how to effect the change within themselves. And I often thought, okay, so what are you saying here? Why is this important? But I realize it's John 1:12. We've been given the power to become, but it doesn't guarantee that you will. Many are called, few are chosen. What's the difference? Vision and sight, ability to see. So the reign of the soul must happen. And I believe all I'm really doing here is I'm not giving you any great mystical key. I'm identifying something that is in the process right now. And it is the Lord's intent that we enter into a deeper experience of this. I know that to walk without the impairment and the encumberment of the soul is so incredibly freeing. For those that have gone to the other side and come back and said, oh, you know, and they're at great peace and freedom and liberty. And yes, and we've experienced to some extent in our forays into the realm of spirit to feel the absolute liberty and freedom without the encumbrance of the soul. So it's very interesting, but God has us destined for a life of incredible freedom and liberty from all the entanglements of the snare of the soul. And it's right here at the door waiting for us. I know that the Lord has brought a word many times and said, you know, write the last chapters, my sons. And I feel as though oftentimes the Lord will give us a vision, a dream. He'll show us what His heart and His intent is. He will give us prophecy. We will see prophetically what is to unfold in the next year, 6 months, whatever the case may be. We'll see it as a defined reality. But I realize that that reality is conditional. Just like this window of time that we're in is conditional upon our initiative, the initiative of our faith to reach in, to grab it, to see it, to do it. And I feel that we've spoken about this window of time that we're in right now. And the window of time, I'm finding more and more confirmation in many diverse and unusual ways that these next 3 months, plus or minus, and even extending into March on some level, are pivotal months. And the question, of course, I posed is, does it mean that that we will change? What does it mean? Does it mean that whatever the Lord's intent is for this time, that it will happen? And I believe that the jury is out on exactly what will happen in this window of time. I believe that there's a tremendous amount that can happen, but I believe it's conditional upon what we do with it. It's like, you know, you remember the story at the pool of Siloam in the book of Acts. Periodically the pool would stir, and when it stirred, anybody that was in the vicinity would go and step in the water and they'd be immediately healed. But they had to be aware that there was that, oh, there's a window of opportunity, that pool is moving. And oftentimes the Lord will bring a word and He will identify a season of time. And all of a sudden you realize that He's opened a portal for change. And what we do with that within that time frame is upon our initiative. I remember a few years ago when we entered into a portal of change. Ann and I did not really understand it. We didn't even know it, except at the end, as the doors closed of that short window of time. And I remember in vision that changes were accomplished. Ann was concerned that we didn't change enough during that window, and yet the Lord said there will be another. And I know for us that we, at that time, did not even know that we were in a window of change, honestly. Not until we stepped right out. And then it was like, oh, my goodness. Only this time, the Lord is giving us a heads up and really saying, okay, I've opened the portals. You're in a time of change, a window of change. You could call it a vortex, like a vortex of energy has come, which oftentimes the feasts, tabernacles, Pentecost, Passover, whatnot, can be that. They can be a vortex of energy, a unique window of opportunity. They are not always that by any means, but they can be. And so I feel as though we have stepped into something that we don't even know what we've stepped into yet. It's like and track with me on this. It's like you've opened the door, God has opened the door, we've opened the door with God, and we've stepped through the door into something else. But we don't know yet.